let's talk about focusing. This is a video for beginners, but I really want everybody to watch through this quick video on the different ways that you can use the tools in your camera to get focus on your subject. Now I'm going to run through this with an 80D, but honestly everything I talk about is applicable to all modern cameras that you might be using out there. So I've got an 80D, and the first method of focus is the one that is the default, but I just want to mention it briefly, and that is a half press on the shutter button. A half press on the shutter button will light up the focus points. One of them will grab onto your subject and give you a nice little beep if you haven't turned that off, letting you know that you've gotten focus. That's one method. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because it's the default and it's kind of basic, but I will say I am a big fan of choosing your focus points. I've got other videos about that I'll link to at the end of this one and down below in the links. The second method of focusing on your subject is to not use the shutter button, half pressing it, but to use a button on the back. Some cameras have a dedicated button, like AF on the 80D here. Some buttons you need to assign dual functions to. It's really easy on the 80D and on most cameras. You can go into the little custom functions, you unassign focus from the shutter button, and you reassign it to the back button. And in some cases it's already turned on those. Why? Why back button focus? I'm not going to get into it in depth. I have a long blog post about it and a video as well. But basically, I like to be the one in charge of my camera, in charge of as many decisions as possible, because my brain, most of the time, is smarter than the camera's brain. So I know if I need to focus again or not. If I'm taking a landscape shot, I roll up, I get my focus, I take my shot, and I've screwed up my exposure. I don't need to focus again. So why, when I press the shutter button, should the camera have to try to focus again? That's just one example. There are many more, and as I said, I've covered it in detail in the blog post. Now, there are other ways of getting focus. In our modern cameras, live view works very nicely, and in some cases, with a mirrorless camera, live view is as fast as looking through the viewfinder. So you can turn live view on, and if you've got a touch screen, you can touch on the screen and get your focus that way. You can even make it take a picture if you want as well, and it all helps if I put my lens into autofocus. So you can touch on the screen, you can get your focus, you can take a picture, but you can also magnify. And on this touch screen, there is a little magnification button that allows you to zoom in. You can press it again. You don't have to use that though. You can use a button on the camera. And again, all modern cameras allow you to magnify live view. Careful, don't call this zoom. Sometimes I am sloppy in my language and I say zoom in on live view. It is not zoom. You're not making the picture closer. You're simply magnifying the image through live view. And now once it is magnified, you can use either autofocus, or you can switch to manual focus, and you have a very good way to precisely see if you're in focus or not. Now, again, some cameras add additional tools in live view like focus peaking on mirrorless models and some DSLRs that will help you determine by putting little fuzzy lines around that area that the camera senses are most in focus, the highest contrast. You can pretty much do it with your own eyes in live view. Now, what's triggered this whole video and this desire to share this with you is just coming back from a fantastic Aurora shooting trip in Alaska with McKay Photography Academy. I love teaching on these trips and working with photographers of all abilities because you really get to see the struggle that sometimes you forget after you've been away from it for a couple years of the different ways to focus and trying to get focus in low light and in different challenging conditions. And this is one of those that I think is fantastic. So we've gone over shutter button, back button focus, live view, magnification in live view, and the last method that I'm offering to you all might seem a little silly, but it is in fact the method that most serious macro photographers use, a rail setup. I don't have a rail setup, but what it does is allow you to very, very finely move the camera back and forth, moving that plane of focus that's out in front of it back and forth until you get your subject in view. When I don't have that with me and I'm shooting on a macro, I will often just take the camera off the tripod and turn that live view on again. I will magnify it again, so nothing new there, but then instead of trying to focus the camera with the lens, moving the lens, I'll actually physically move the lens forward and backward, watching to see where I've got the best focus. Not too impressive with this, but if you put on something like the Venus 2X macro 60mm, where you can do a 2X macro, then moving it forward and backward through that plane, you will see. Then I suggest you fire off a burst of images. That will allow you to get a sharp one as you pass through that point that you want most in focus. Another method I haven't talked about here that I will come back and talk about in the future is focus stacking. That's kind of an advanced technique where you can take multiple images with different parts of the image in focus and then smush all of the focused areas together, that's the technical term for it, and have a very large depth of field when you're working with a very shallow depth of field in each image. If you've got any questions about this, what did I miss? What focusing method is your favorite? Do you use back button focus? Do you hate back button focus? Because I know some people try it and they say this is not for me. The one downside is with back button focus, if you hand your camera off to a waiter, you are not going to get sharp pictures because they're not going to know to push that button. But for me, it's the first thing I turn on all of the cameras I get in to review because I am most comfortable using that button now, and I think most people should give it a try. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye. It's been a while since I've done a 2-camera shoot all on my own like this. I want to talk about the different ways you can get focus on your subject. It's starting to rain.